Set her over here, Daniel.
Good morning, how are you?
This morning.
How are you today?
We should
Good.
last at least 3 hours. That's my goal.
Okay. I'm really surprised that that's as consumptive as it
I
is.
think because they're Bluetooth.
It just must be throwing a big signal. Joe?
Greg, how you doing?
Well, you?
I'm good, thank you.
Joe, I appreciate those emails that you sent out.
everybody. Oh, goodness. Just screwed up already. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much. We are expecting a few more folks. They both texted. Sandra Parker Murray is on her way. Welcome, Judith, and we believe Kevin Duncan is on the phone. But to be respectful of everyone's time, and just we have a lot of things we need to get done today. It's our last meeting together. We're going to go ahead and get started. So, thank you.
All right. For those of you I haven't met before, my name is Greg Belomo. This is Workshop 7 of the Paid Family and Medical Leave Task Force. It's December 17th at 9:08. We have a lot to do today. Here's what we're trying to achieve. This is our final meeting, and so our goals are these: achieve consensus on the final and the review. Okay, so we've got to get action, owner, timing very, very detailed, because there's not many days, especially given the holidays, between now and January 8th. Okay, so those are the two things that we're trying to accomplish. The agenda basically says that. Okay, we're here for an entire workday, so we're going to engage in discussion. We'll do a little bit of opening. We'll engage in discussion around certain parameters. Take a morning break and an afternoon break, 15 minutes each. During our working lunch break, Pinnacle Assurance is going to give us some additional information related to their work around the option that they have proposed to you all. So we use the working lunch period. We'll take 20 minutes for them to share some updated information based on the model that they put forward to you earlier. And then 20 minutes of Q&A for you all to understand the implications of that vis-a-vis everything else you have been debating. We need to have time at the end for a couple of very important things. One of them is to finalize that plan for the drafting. Who needs to do what in order to enable someone else to do their bit, to enable someone else to do their bit, to get this thing over the finish line by January 8th. And just as importantly, last we have, this is our last public comment period. So we want to make sure we allow sufficient time for that. For those of you in the back, if you need to come and go, we're estimating 4:40. And as always, if there are things that you would like to have read to the task force because that doesn't work for your timeline, that's certainly an option. Okay. Any questions on the objectives of the agenda? Okay, then a little bit of history here. There has been so much done, so many inputs to you all. So we've had the administration analyses, the health impact study, hundreds, if verging on 1,000 public comments, expert analyses and perspectives. You all got to some initial recommendations to inform the actuarial analysis. That actuarial analysis was drafted. We had that meeting, you all refined that, okay? But we haven't yet had a chance to update the recommendations based upon what has been sent. In other words, you voted on ranges, a high model, a low model. We need to get into depth around, do you want to come together on a single number? Do you want to just offer the range as guidance to the policymakers? Okay. So we're here at the very end. Our job today, and we have a full day, but that's not very much time given the breadth of this topic, to get to final recommendations. Okay. So, a couple of quick reminders here. You all have done, I think, a wonderful job working together. You're always respectful. A couple of things I want to point out for us. One, we've got the actuarial analysis in final format. So, as you're able to, use that data to zero in on the impact of specific proposals. Okay? So that's a change from what we've had in the past. As always, correct inaccuracies. There's a lot of moving pieces here. Tara's going to raise our attention to one that we all remember. We just got to go dig and find out what the actual notes read. Be creative, avoid extremes. And one final thought for you. There are no additional meetings. So today, we're either going to have to get to a recommendation or agree to disagree, in which case we're going to draft minority opinions or look at two alternatives. Not even make a recommendation, simply share your alternatives and your rationale for each. All right? You guys okay to move forward on that? All righty. So I've done a couple of things for you all. We have in your packets, and for those of you in the audience, they're available on the table where Cher is sitting. Okay. You have a few different things. One of them is recommendation scorecard. And the recommendation scorecard is basically, it's very preliminary. That's why you see the watermark on it. But what it contains are all of the things you all have voted on so far. And today what we need to do is say, are we good with that? If we're good with that, then we need to write it up. Who's going to do that? So who will be the author? And if it's a case where we need a minority opinion, who's going to write the minority opinion? And we're going to get very detailed. So you see behind me a blown up version of that scorecard, and it is not as legible as I would hope, but with red, yellow, green, and some large print, you're going to know which ones you've signed up for. Okay? So this is the start of that narrowing process where we're going to get to action owner timing by the end of today that will allow us to synthesize your final report. Okay? All right. So one additional thing that we need to discuss, this is the second page in your packets. It looks like so. It reads report, template, proposal. Okay? So we've kicked out a draft template, but there hasn't really been time to populate it. So we still have time to mess with it a little bit. I'm going to make a proposal to you all. So before I talk about the template, I want to just introduce the situation. So you all commissioned an actuarial analysis, and you sent to Bob and his team a high benefit model and a low benefit model. If you start zeroing in on numbers that are between that high benefit and low benefit model, which in many cases you will likely do, then the actuarial analysis is simply brackets. All of these things, here's the total cost of the program. All of these things, here's the total cost of the program. But if you start fine-tuning the levers that went into those estimates, then our certainty of what the implication is falls apart. Okay? So if we think about the integrity of that actuarial analysis for the policymakers, you have a few options. If you have strong consensus on either, between you all, on either the low benefit model or the high benefit model, we can just write recommendations and write minority opinions. If you don't have strong consensus, then we've got a couple of options. One is you simply promote those ranges and say no recommendation was reached. Here's what the high benefit model showed on this topic and why we think that's good medicine. Here's what the low benefit model yielded on this. Here's why we think it's good medicine. Don't make a recommendation, propose a range. The alternative is you can get into narrowing. The best example I can think of is eligibility. $300 of earnings versus $5,000 of earnings in the high benefit and low benefit respectively. That's a big range, right? But if you choose a number in between, average them, get to 1,500-ish, then all of a sudden you have to just acknowledge that the actuarial analysis at that point is simply brackets, right? The total cost of the program are brackets, okay? Now I'm going to explain to you what that'll mean, and then we'll answer some questions on it. So have a look at this piece of paper. Okay. This is a slight fine-tuning of the report template that we circulated to you all. And I chose two elements on which I think this makes, that illustrate how these two options would be different. In the top option, and you get to the issue analysis. Remember, we've got these 18 elements we need to share. We're going to give a recap of what you were tasked to do. If you reach strong consensus, we'll articulate the recommendation. These are the reasons for family leave. These are the reasons for medical leave. Here's the supporting evidence out of all of your expert testimony and out of the expert reports. And if needed, we've got room for a minority opinion. So you want to make a firm recommendation on something very specific. This would be the format. The table beneath that is the scenario where you don't want to make a firm recommendation. You want to propose a range or consensus. We're tipping around 50%, which isn't a strong mandate. In that case, and I used duration of leave as the example, you'd simply say the task force did not reach consensus on that. But we asked the actuary to model these parameters. Here's the rationale for the low benefit. Here's the rationale for the high benefit. You simply deliver ranges. So I spoke a lot just there. I'm going to pause and see, does that make sense to you all, and are you okay with that as a working structure? Okay, I'm seeing some heads nod. I'm seeing some other people I think are still absorbing it, so let's give that a couple minutes. By the way, content in here is dummy. It's just illustrative.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah,
This
Hadley,
is- oh,
we
yeah.
distributed the microphones as
Sorry about
always,
that.
if we could. Keep them moving down.
This may seem like a hello. This may seem like a minor thing, but I think it would be good throughout the report if we try to use as consistent language as possible. So when we say supporting evidence for the recommendation, we may want to say rationale, because that's what we're saying
Sure.
below, and that might be a broader category of points that we might want to make besides existing facts, data, evidence. It's a minor, it's fine tuning, and when we have minority opinions or minority views or whatever we want to call them, just to be consistent throughout each recommendation so that it's not, alternative information or alternative fact,
Sure.
but it's every time we name it minority opinions. I just request that we keep consistent, that's all.
We're going to move quickly here. Show of thumbs. Are you guys good with changing supporting evidence to rationale?
Yep.
Cool. And is minority opinion acceptable to you?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Other thoughts on this method? Quick show of thumbs, good enough to go forward? All things break down once you really, really start scrutinizing them. So let's go and practice with a real example. But, all right. We're going to ask you to vote here in a little while on whether you're all in on the high benefit, all in on the low benefit, but let's go through a couple of others here. So, at this point,
We're sharing, it's fine. Good. Okay.
we'll get you one, just one second.
Thanks.
The American check.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we'll be working off of this scoreboard. And when Daniel returns, I'll give that to him on a stick so that he can project it here. But everybody in the back have a copy. Looks just like this. Okay. So I mentioned before that when we were taking the majority of our votes, we were saying, hey, let's have the actuary do this. That doesn't necessarily mean that you all are in support of that be going to the policymakers as your final recommendation. So we need to go through and just check every one as we work our way down. And we may need additional recommendations that we haven't proposed so far. All of that is on the table, but we've got to move quickly. So my ask to you all is, if you have a significant beef, raise it and raise it directly. If you don't, let's go quickly to voting. We're going to get things done. Tick, tick, tick. We're going to try to turn things from red to green. All right? The first item, element 1, is purposes of leave. And you all said that paid family leave should be available to Colorado workers for these reasons. Okay? And you sent that to the actuary. There's a series of family reasons. There's a series of medical reasons. Let me ask you all, do you agree that that should be the recommendation that ends up in the final report? Okay? Anybody got a beef? Here, let's do it that way. Does anybody wish to entertain discussion on changing that item?
This is Stacy. This is Stacy Campbell. I don't know if I have a beef, but I just maybe am looking for clarity. So we said care for family members.
That's under 4, we're gonna get to that.
Yeah, definition of family is under 4, under number 4.
No beef.
Cool. Good. Jared? Pending.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone has a concern with this, but if we could also clarify childbirth, adoption, and foster care, that's consistent with the FMLA and pretty much all of the legal laws around the country.
Adding foster care.
Yeah. Okay.
Jared, I'm sorry, adding it to number 1, you mean?
Yeah, it's a number 1 in terms of bonding with the child, and it would be consistent with the FMLA.
Okay. Admir, are you prepared for votes?
I'm sorry.
Are you prepared for votes? Okay. Let's go ahead and memorialize these things. And again, if you all feel like you need to have additional discussion, go ahead. I'm just looking around the room. It doesn't seem like it. Oh, Diana? Can you pass Diana a microphone?
So if we vote that we agree to these particular parameters, does that also imply that we have no concerns? Does that mean we will not have an opportunity to register a minority opinion?
Cool. Absolutely not. So here's how we'll do it. And it was just blind mercy that this one comes up first. Okay? So what we'll do is we'll say, if this is accepted by you all, okay, we're gonna call that green. We're gonna ask for somebody to be the author of the rationale. If you would like to be the author of the minority opinion, that's the last column, right? And by the way, minority opinion doesn't mean that you strictly oppose it. It may mean that you simply want to add an alternate perspective, or, you know, what if everybody said no to Jared's idea of adding foster care, right? Jared may want to make the pitch for that again, right? So I think that's a convenient example. Is that helpful, Diana?
Yes, it is. I mean, when I read some of this language, it says paid leave should be available to Colorado workers for these reasons. And that's a broad statement. And so for me to vote yes on that, there's some nuance there. Because when as a participant, I have always framed this as if we do choose to pass a paid family leave policy, then the paid family leave policy should look like this. And so to strip some of that language down just makes me a little uncomfortable. And so I do want to have an opportunity to raise concerns, even if I do vote to support the pieces in that recommendation.
Sure. And this is Lydia. I would just remind everyone too that we are sending our recommendations, and so this is not the end of the process towards this. There's still a lot more to come, but this is what we're sending in terms of documenting what we've discussed, our rationales for where we got to with the recommendations that we sent to the actuary and other things. And so if that's helpful, I know that's helpful for me to think about in terms of, like, I still got, months at the legislature to register all of those things, but this is really just the documentation of what we've discussed, what our outputs are, and how we got to those decisions.
Can I make a statement and then I have a question? My statement is in response to Diana, because I'm kind of on the same page. I mean, if you're a no vote on social insurance, then I don't want to have to relitigate that in every point, right? So right. I'm going to vote yes on the purposes of leave, with the understanding that this is in the ideal scenario, whatever the path to this is, whether it's social insurance or some other model. This is, in my ideal world, what the paid leave would cover. However, my question is, in votes that are unanimous, does that necessarily mean there will be no section in their recommendations for concerns or additional information or minority opinion? Because it would seem that if there's no minority count of votes, then we might not want to include a minority opinion, so that's my question.
I think
Sarah,
the
microphone.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think the important point was what was said earlier, is that minority opinions just can include additional information and perspective. So it doesn't have to be that you can only write something adding on if there was a no, you voted no or a vote. I think that's important. That will save us, I think, a lot of
Right.
angst if we all appreciate that.
Just, although going back to your earlier point about stating rationale, so that we're consistent throughout, so that it's short and concise, and this is my rationale for this concern.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that last bit, Kathy, is very, very important.
Yeah.
Right.
Long documents don't get read.
No, that's right.
Okay, short ones with consistent formats, people learn to get the information they need, they'll use your product. Y'all have worked too hard to give that away. Judith, let's pass Judith the microphone.
I just want to state that I wasn't under that understanding. Yesterday I took a vote and it was a minority vote specifically for that reason, because I thought that that was the only way that I could state the minority opinion, and I did state that in my vote yesterday. So I guess I'm just a little unclear in the process. I did believe that if you are in minority vote, then that is what entitles you to have a minority recommendation.
Okay.
And then also, yes, in regards to the rationale, I think that it's important that, it's under the context that we have been working on, the SB 188 and what was put forth in that law and in this.
So friendly amendment, just from me, what if we called it alternate perspective rather than minority opinion? Because I feel like minority belongs somehow with a formal vote. Hadley?
What if, for the
Stacy?
sake of using consistent language, when we do have a minority voting block, however large or small, one person, 3 people, whatever, that can be a minority opinion, but when we vote unanimously, we can include a section called concerns.
I think this is Stacy Campbell, I think something like that makes sense, because I kind of agree with Judith, and she was very clear yesterday, I think before she voted, she said, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And I think if we're gonna give guidance to the legislature, if it's unanimous, it's unanimous. If it's a minority opinion, it seems to me there are some people who are saying, who are voting against it.
Yeah.
So I kind of with Judith here that, it means something, so maybe Hadley, you're-
Concerns and clarifications, minority opinion.
You guys okay with concerns?
And clarifications sounds good.
Concerns and
Like that?
clarifications? Show of thumbs? Okay, so I'll make that adjustment up here.
Thank you.
Keep up the details.
Words matter.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion on the format, the process? Because otherwise, I think we should try to demonstrate and see how well it holds up for us. Okay. So, does anyone want to? We need to move fast. Do we need a motion on the floor?
No.
Do we want to just go to a vote?
Yes.
Okay. So, who votes to accept language like this? That's on this
Purposes
thing?
of leave.
Okay. So. Mira, do you want to go ahead and just read the votes? Or would you prefer that I do the
Roll call.
roll call?
Greg, before you get in, I just want to make sure, Jared, on what you added, it was foster care and what else?
Just foster care.
Just, okay.
Okay. All right, we'll go to vote then. Kevin, are you able to hear us okay?
Yes.
Cool. Campbell,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Haygood,
Yes.
Make,
Yes.
Manning,
Yes.
Marquez,
Yes.
McKinnish,
Yes.
Parker Murray,
Yes.
Petrack.
So, just so that I understand,
leave the microphones on, please. We'll just
So-
replace the batteries.
So you said that the language is gonna be, like, for example, in number one, paid leave should be available to Colorado workers for these reasons. Then underneath it will say concerns and clarifications. So if I vote in support of that, I am saying that paid leave should be available to Colorado workers for these reasons.
And then
I
you-
believe that, yes.
Yes.
And you
This
can-
is stripped down language.
Then you can clarify that we don't agree as a task force on the means to that end, but we're supportive of the end,
Well,
if you are.
I feel that that may lead me to reconsider some of my votes if we strip down the language that much. Am I being naive here?
Sorry, strip down which parts for clarification?
Well, if we're gonna take each of these recommendations in isolation, and I am saying that paid leave should be available to Colorado workers for these reasons, and I support that, then my only option is to add concerns. I guess I'm still trying to get my head around that, but
Kathy?
that's where we do it.
Would it be helpful if we changed that to like purpose, like instead of the should be available, like to say that eligible, purposes of leave or something like that, like in a perfect world, as Hadley said, in a perfect world, people should be able to take time off from work and be absent from work, and these are legitimate reasons, all of them that are listed. And so instead of saying should, because we're not establishing a policy, we're just saying that these are legitimate reasons for people to need paid family medical leave.
Well, I think we're trying to put forth recommendations for a policy. And so I don't think that, I don't mind being more direct about that, but it seems to me that we should be saying a paid family leave policy should make available to Colorado workers,
I don't think that's what we're doing. I think we're really just talking about, these are the things that we've talked about under this topic of purpose of leave. Because we are not crafting an ideal policy and telling the legislature you should do this. That we're simply saying these are the things that we've discussed. And here's where we kind of fall on them.
So we may arrive at that option in a completely different way than a paid family leave policy through a state-run program.
Can I ask you a question, Diane? So here's one thing that I think we have similar views on this in a lot of ways, but my conceptualization of this is, should the legislature pass a paid family leave policy, regardless of how it looks, do I have a difference in terms of the purposes of leave with what's written here? And so if you, for example, say, I don't want this to apply to military service related leave, and that's your particular point of disagreement you have with the way this is currently drafted, then if I were you, I'd vote no. But if you find these purposes of leave generally as drafted acceptable for whatever the policy looks like. I mean, if you're just, that's how I conceptualize it. I think if the legislature passes a policy, even if it's not a policy that I would support, would I find the purposes of leave to be an acceptable set of purposes of leave? I don't personally have one of these that I would pick out and say I disagree with that. If I did, I might be a no vote. Right, right, but I think that will be the case with a lot of these sections. So that's, maybe I'm conceptualizing of it wrong.
No.
But
Well, you all were assigned, I mean, the I in family is implementation. You all were assigned, to make recommendations that would inform such a policy. Okay, so Diana, your choices are, you can either oppose it and write a minority, or excuse me, a minority opinion,
Right.
or you can support it and say concerns and clarifications.
Right.
Those are your two choices.
Right.
I would also add, I'm totally tracking with how you're feeling on a variety of things, but whatever we send to the state doesn't mean the state's gonna do either.
Right.
So I just think we just gotta do the best job of documenting how we feel as a group.
Right.
And then we let the chips fall where they may.
Right.
Diana, can you just articulate kind of what's your concern?
And into a microphone, please.
We are in the middle of a vote, so, but I'm
Right.
glad we have this
Right,
time.
right. Well, from a very, very core sense of position here, I do not support a state-run policy for paid family leave.
Okay.
That said,
Yep.
I am here to voice concerns
Yep.
and to try to influence certain pieces of that policy so that it has the least amount of an impact where I see.
Sure.
to
Sure.
go.
Right. Right.
But this statement in no way says in a social insurance model or a private mandate model. It's just saying whatever the delivery mechanism is, you include the purpose of the leave to be these statements.
Okay, if
Correct?
that is how it's framed.
Yes.
Correct.
Because-
It's not picking one model or not a 3 models or 5 models, it's just saying, with the paid family
Right.
leave model, you support the purpose of the program to be this.
Right.
All right, well, it's just that as we took vote by vote by vote by vote, now it's being embedded into a full document with
Yeah.
language. And so
Right.
I just want to make sure that I'm clear.
Right.
I think we can make it clear in the recommendations as a whole that there are some task force members who would rather, if this is your position, would rather have the status quo versus whatever the new policy might be, right? It may be that it's, yeah, exactly. It may not be a difference in models. It may just be, if you're knowing everything, you're knowing everything, and that's an acceptable position. We can make that clear. But I guess the choice is, do you want to include that in every single recommendation, or is there some section of the report, for example, the part about program structure where we could discuss that? And I think that's probably a better place for that.
I think that's likely a better place.
Yes. Right.
Okay, so let's continue with the vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Patrak,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Waligorski,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Zoe.
Yes.
Here comes the question. Diana, would you like to, well, let me say this. Who'd like to be the rationale author? Who wants to write this small table like the one that I shared with you all?
I'll do it.
Kathy?
Okay. Thank you. And I think too, it's helpful to clarify that, like, we're talking sentences in the
Yeah.
table.
Yes.
Not paragraphs. Not paragraphs, not dissertations.
Bullets are helpful, references are good.
Links are fine. Thank you all.
Okay. And so let me ask the next question. Would anyone like to either author, well, as there are no votes against, concerns and clarifications related to this one?
I'm looking at you,
And-
Diana.
And Diana, I think your concern is not with the demographics, or it was concerned between the,
How we
delivery.
Sure.
move forward.
So that would be down in the models.
yeah, so
Right.
that's, so maybe there is no rationale for minority, or unless someone wants to add another population, right, or exclude a population?
No, but we voted on this twice with
Yeah.
unanimous votes, so I think, or do we feel it? So we voted on this component twice with unanimous votes, and so, are we okay with letting this stand? We can do concerns for each one, as they come up, or we can say unanimous decisions. We don't necessarily feel the need to go into that, so.
Now you're backtracking, or don't,
No.
Okay,
you're
all right.
backtracking on our earlier language, so.
Let's offer
You're going-
flexibility,
Gotcha.
as much consistency as possible for the benefit of the reader, while using, or I should say, while lodging our objections where they best fit. Okay. All right, so does anyone wish to author concerns and clarifications? Okay, we're green. Give yourself a round of applause. Okay, we're gonna try again on one that will have, I think, some similar sort of issues.
We have a
Jeff?
clarification question, Greg. Is foster care now in that?
Yes.
Or?
Yes.
Yes.
Always has been.
That was part of?
Always has been.
Okay,
Yeah.
Right next to the motion.
thank you.
Okay, so the next item is number 2, which is self-employed workers' access to leave. One of our guidelines is if we've ever made a mistake or we have a false reference or something like that, we'll just fix it, right? So Tara had an observation associated with this one, if you don't mind, Tara.
I was just, my recollection was when we did vote unanimously on allowing self-employed workers to opt in to the paid family leave, we included with that sort of the standard policy of then requiring them to opt in for 3 years at a time. So someone couldn't opt in, grab the benefits and leave. And so I have a new motion, I think, but my recollection is that that was part of our original vote.
Right.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so with a requirement for a 3-year,
Right,
Right.
right.
right? Okay? Everybody okay with that one?
Yes.
My recollection is the same, but I didn't have a detailed note on it. Okay. So let me ask, does anyone want to discuss this one? Because yeah, Hadley,
I
go
just
ahead.
have
Pass the
a
microphone,
proposed
please.
language amendment. It doesn't change the meaning, but I think it clarifies our meaning here. Because there are many eligible workers that I believe we're gonna say should have access to paid family medical leave, so perhaps to clarify the contrast with the self-employed group of workers, we could add a couple words that say self-employed workers have the option to access paid family medical leave, because they're the only, I mean, not the only group, we'll talk about exemptions later, but in contrast to non-self-employed workers.
So self-employed workers should have the option to access paid family and medical leave with a 3-year.
Right.
Do we call that buy-in? Or what's the technical term for the 3-year?
Should have the option to enroll or.
I don't think we need to wordsmith
Yeah.
in this committee.
Right.
Is it just a,
Just the option.
So who likes Hadley's, I agree with you, Dr. McKinnish, but Hadley's amendment is actually important. Okay, so with the option.
I know we shouldn't wordsmith, but I do think the language matters, especially when we have fewer words. So I might even go so far as to say self-employed workers should have the option to access the paid family and medical leave benefit or program. Just because, there's a lot of people who have paid family medical leave today. There's privately provided benefits, and I don't know if we need to be specific. I mean, I presume that a lot of people reading this report will read it with the mentality that paid family medical leave in this context means the government policy. But I don't know if that.
Other discussion on this topic?
Do you want to write the rationale?
Wait, we didn't vote yet.
Right, sorry.
Let's vote.
Okay, should we vote?
Yeah.
Okay, so with the adjustment, should have the option to access. And with a 3-year period language, apologize, I don't know those words. Judith? Microphone to Judith, please.
No, just to clarify, so you're adding, sorry, I'm just trying to, because there's a lot of information and I think our process is shifting a little as we kind of like adjust, so what was our recommendation, please, can you clarify?
Yeah, and Daniel, you're free to make this change as well so that it can be up on the thing. Self-employed workers should have the option to access paid family and medical leave with some period of commitment to the program.
I thought we were gonna recommend 3 years.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, and she's right, we're changing, but what we're doing is we're trying to zero in on something that works. So, you guys okay with that? Is it clear enough to go to a vote?
yes.
Any objections that, okay. All right, let's go to a roll call vote. Campbell?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Haygood,
Yes.
Make,
Yes.
Manning,
Yes.
Marquez,
Yes.
McKinnish,
Yes.
Parker Murray,
Yes.
Petrarch,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Waligorski,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Zoe.
Yes.
Okay, so we're getting into a rhythm here. Tara?
I'd like to volunteer to write the rationale. I'd also like to volunteer to write a clarification and concern of my own. That has to do with the, whether self-employed workers have essentially a tax rate reduction. But that'll just be my own. I know that's not something we need to vote on.
Okay. All right. Any other, anybody else want to write a concern or clarification associated with that one? Diana? Please pass Diana a microphone.
Can we leave it open to work with whoever's decided to author, or do we have to make that decision right now?
No, I think you can do that, but at the end of the day, we've got like 3 weeks between now and January 8th.
No, I understand that.
So you would be beholden to the same timeline at the end. You'd have to get your input to
I do
Tara
have
early
one,
enough.
do have one concern, but I would be happy to discuss that with Tara, knowing that she is the one that's authoring that.
Cool.
So, this is Stacy Campbell's question. Ideally, I guess I am envisioning, although we haven't said it, maybe I missed it if we did, that although individuals are writing parts of the plan, it's all gonna come together and we're all going to have an opportunity to review it.
Yes.
Yes. Look at the last page. You will see something that looks like this. We've got to agree on a path to that final recommendation, okay? And what I would say is everybody's got to get their content. You got to synthesize it. You're all going to have a look at it, make your edits, and then those edits need to be embodied. That's the minimum that I can envision. Judith?
I just have a question. I have a question. Is it on?
It's on.
In regards to our process around, again, like adding this minority opinion concerns and clarification, I guess my question is like, I would like to know what concerns are coming up, because if they're new ideas, if they're new topics of conversation, I feel like that's also the task of this task force, is to discuss that. So I feel that as people do state that I want to, share a concern, I think it would be important for me to understand what that is. I think that that's the purpose, and I do feel that that like our task is to reflect the conversations that have been happening in this room. So I just would ask that, what is that?
Okay. Yeah, so if we could, in
clarify.
a sentence or two though, because we don't have time to actually re-adjudicate the vote.
To clarify, this is something I raised when we first did self-employed, so it is part of the record.
Oh, no, you're fine. I
Right,
was thinking
okay.
just moving
Okay.
as
Yeah.
we move forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'm gonna make another friendly proposal, which would be, if you think you're going to, put your name up here. Okay, it doesn't mean you're the author. We gotta have a quarterback, but this would mean Diana, I'd add you up there. You either need to chat with
That I have a point.
Tara, but that way she makes sure that, okay? Great. Ready to move to number 3? Okay, you're doing good, guys. Eligibility to take leave. So, this is the first that belonged to this dramatically impacts what happens next. Okay? So if you all agree that the high model makes sense or the low model makes sense, then we can move very quickly through a number of these. If you don't, then we're going to go line by line with the goal of either not agreeing and representing the rationale for the high and the low, or zeroing in on some middle number. Dr. T?
So I'm gonna actually, this is one where I'm gonna, just to see if there's actually a middle ground that we can get a consensus on. Because having thought about this particular parameter more, I actually really like the idea of using the UI eligibility threshold for consistency, which is 2,500 and earnings as the threshold. The piece that goes with that, if we're going to do that to be consistent with the UI requirement, then for the UI policy, that threshold goes together with a particular calculation of the worker's average weekly wage. And my understanding is that previous legislation draft used that same UI calculation for the average worker's average weekly wage. And in the UI model, those two pieces go together. The eligibility threshold and how the wage is calculated are part of the same cohesive policy design. So what I'd like to put out there is that we use the 2,500 earnings threshold for eligibility, a low eligibility threshold, and we also use the UI average wage calculation, and that allows a lot of consistency in implementing this program because it's consistent with UI.
So before we entertain that, I just want to do a hand vote, just a poll, okay? Who really thinks that we should go whole hog and submit the high benefit model? Your only alternative is whole hog, low benefit model. Do we have enough mass behind either of those ideas?
So to clarify, in this case, the high benefit model is actually the lower threshold.
It would be the
Correct.
$300
Not to be confused. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And I think consistently it reflects which value belongs to which. It's just, this one's kind of reversed.
But you're
Okay.
talking,
Kathy?
are you talking about,
Microphone. For Kevin.
are you talking about, sorry.
Just
I
for
messed
this
up.
parameter, I think.
No.
No, I mean the whole thing.
You're talking about the whole thing.
Okay, I'm
So
gonna go
like
back to
one-
my point here.
Oh.
Before we start digging into any of these, and so I appreciated what Tara said, and I may agree or disagree with her, but before we do that, we gotta figure out whether we're gonna open Pandora's box or not. Okay? So, if you wanna preserve the integrity of the actuarial analysis, if you wanna say with whatever uncertainty is baked into Bob and his team's analysis, you could either say, we accept all of the high benefit parameters or all of the low benefit parameters. If you start getting to middle ground, the actuarial analysis is no longer dependable, okay? Simply because, you know, the parameters change. So let's do a quick poll. Does anybody think we should go with the high benefit model across the board? Does anybody think we should go with the low benefit model across the board? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Kevin, were you hands up or? We mute.
Can you repeat, Kevin?
Low budget. Dang it.
The low benefit model, would you support going with that whole hog?
Yes, if you can hear me, low budget model.
Yep, thank you. So that would be 6.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, we heard you. Okay, so I counted 6 votes would be supportive of that. That's why I asked the question. 6 is not a super majority. Who feels comfortable, and this is only one option, do you feel comfortable basically saying that whatever we're gonna give you, whatever combination of parameters, such as accepting a 2,500 UI minimum, all of a sudden turns the actuarial analysis only into brackets? Show of hands, who's comfortable with that?
I don't understand the statement you're making.
So if you start selecting parameters that were not given to the actuary, then the actuarial analysis simply represents an upper bound and a lower bound on the parameters that were offered.
Well, it's just giving bounds regardless, right? So,
In light of the uncertainty baked into it.
So 2 things. One is that we don't want to, like I said, overstate that if we move away from these parameters, we're losing a bunch of certainty we had previously.
Yep.
Second of all, some of these changes would be relatively inconsequential. Like the one I proposed would be quite inconsequential to the cost. Other changes could be quite consequential. But yeah, so I'm not really sure what the purpose of that statement was.
Well, it's exactly what I said before. Within bounds of uncertainty of his analysis, and he was very upfront about that, if you want to offer either of those programs, then you would be giving the policymaker something that was actually analytically consistent. If you start cracking into things, you're introducing new uncertainty, small or large, and you're really just putting some kind of upper and lower bounds on the discussion. Are you all okay with that?
Yes.
Show of hands? Okay, it looks like I got 9 hands that say that's okay. Right? All right. Then, Sandra, were you going to say something?
Yes, I wanted to ask, so are you saying the 2,500, the UI model would be hard for them to figure out versus the 300 to 5,000 stretch goals?
No. I'm simply saying that when Bob did his calculation on the high benefit and low benefit, he did it based on a real low number and a real high number. If you start tweaking those numbers, Bob doesn't rerun his analysis to give us a new answer. So we have to accept that as we start picking and choosing, Bob's number is no longer representative of this recommendation. So that's all.
This is Stacy Campbell. As I read the legislation, I thought that's kind of what we were supposed to do. We were to come up with a recommendation to give to the actuary. The actuary was to go do the numbers, bring the numbers back, and then from there, we were to decide whether we accept them or not. And I think, Tara makes a good point. I mean, I think Bob did a good job with what he had, but it doesn't give me a lot of confidence that those are the numbers. And so I kind of always understood that we would get Bob's information, we'd come back here and we'd talk about it, but then we'd kind of decide based on what we would move, how we'd move forward.
Yeah, and I saw 9 hands, and I don't think everybody was, that I caught all of them, that agree with what you just said. But again, before we do that, you all have to accept, and you all have to nod your head, that all of a sudden, we are no longer offering the actuarial analysis in an integral form. Okay? Which is within your right. I just want to make sure that you're not doing that without thinking about it. Okay? So, everybody is okay to move on?
Move on.
To talk about Tara's $2,500 compromise number. Yeah.
I have another question about number
Sure.
3, but I don't want to take us away from this conversation.
Okay, so let's chat about Tara's $2,500 number. Who feels like making it consistent with UI is, and the calculation methodology associated with that, is a good idea? Or who thinks it's a bad idea and wants to ask her a question?
I think it's a good idea.
Do you guys want to go? Edwin, go ahead.
Edwin Zoe, yeah, I think given the numbers of 300 to 5,000, that it's pretty much splitting right in the middle, and that seems like a very reasonable number given the range that we're dealing with. So I would suggest that we put this to a vote.
Okay. Diana, you were going to raise an additional point. Will that affect this vote?
My only concern is the language here. It says eligibility to take leave. It says workers will be eligible to take leave. And in my mind, to be more clear, it is eligible to the wage replacement insurance. I mean, we're going to have a separate eligibility for job protection.
Correct.
So
Correct.
I think that if we're handing this recommendation to legislators who are also juggling other legislation, we should be careful to be clear with that.
Yeah, so I'm seeing some head nods. So it reads something like, workers will be eligible for wage replacement benefits if they have X dollars of earnings within a period. Something like that?
Just strike to take leave on the end and replace that part. That's what I'm doing.
Eligibility.
Okay. I heard somebody call for a vote. Ooh, Diana?
I do think that it should be clear that it's wage replacement,
Yes.
because that's one thing that
Yes.
took me a while to get
Yes.
my head around, was that
yes.
these are two separate.
I was suggesting we strike the last 3 words and replace them with something like for wage replacement.
Place it with what?
Wage replacement.
Let me take a crack at wording this.
Under-
Workers with at least $2,500, or I should say, do we call it the UI minimum, or $2,500?
I think we should say the UI minimum, so therefore it adjusts over time with the UI minimum.
Workers with a UI minimum of earnings in a given period will be eligible for wage replacement benefits.
And I would like to put this to, go ahead and have this vote basically say we're following UI for the eligibility threshold and UI for the average worker wage calculation, so that we're being coherent for both pieces.
Okay, let's give Daniel a chance to make sure that we've got what you think, and then I see Jared over there. Wage replacement benefits. And then Tara, you wanted to add a couple of words?
If it were adjusted, yeah.
What additional words were you going to add, Tara?
I was gonna, the language actually belongs in another section, but I feel like for the purposes of policy design, these two pieces go together.
Okay.
That they're using the UI minimum, because you want to be consistent with UI, you should also use the average workers' average weekly wage calculation for UI as well. So I'd like to see if you would agree to do that jointly on this vote, even though the language would go down on the benefit replacement calculation layer.
Okay. Do you all understand that? I think what we're basically saying is we're going to adopt this method and we're going to calculate it consistently with something we already do.
Just to be sure.
Yeah, Evan.
We are gonna keep the two components separate in its relevant sections.
Yes.
Okay. Ready to vote? And Kevin, remember, I can't see you, so if you hear me continuing, it's just because you're on mute or I'm not hearing you, okay?
Would you just repeat it for me? I can't see.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Yep. So it reads,
Yeah.
workers with at least the UI minimum in earnings for a given period will be eligible for wage replacement benefits. Okay. And Daniel, if you can increase the scale of that just a hair, it'd be helpful. Task force.
Should we change eligibility to take leave to eligibility for wage replacement?
Yeah, that's already done.
Well,
But he
so this
needs
is
to
what's
be
given to you
entitled.
by the,
That's, okay.
This is prescribed in our mandate.
this is given, yeah.
But we
I
make
don't
it,
know if that's problematic or not.
we make it clear in our statement that we
Right.
mean wage replacement.
Okay.
I think that's sufficient. I think. Great.
Or take leave with wage replacement benefits?
I think we're good.
See that?
The way it is right now. You're good.
Okay, you guys ready to vote?
Got it.
Moving along.
Alrighty, we'll go to a roll call vote. Campbell,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Haygood,
Yes.
Make,
Yes.
Manning,
Yes.
Marquez,
Yes.
McKinnish,
Yes.
Parker Murray,
Yes.
Petrak,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Waligorski,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Zoe.
Yes.
Okay. Who would like to author the rationale?
I'm happy to do that one too.
Okay, Kathy. And again, if you want to hit up Kathy on the break and say, hey, I'll help you out, or if you want to give her some friendly advice, you sure can. But we need a quarterback for each of these. We need one belly button who's going to drive this thing to an acceptable draft. Okay. Does anybody want to offer concerns and clarifications?
I can do that.
Hadley? Great. How about we tackle one more and then a break? Good with that? Wait till I tell you which one it is. You might change your mind.
The next one.
The next one is the definition of family.
Sorry on that.
Do we need 10 minutes now, or do you want to charge in?
I'm still kindergarten.
Charge in? All right. So, bit of history. You all said that you would like to ask the actuary whether it was possible to provide data on the impact of a plan with a family definition which includes the following: child, parent, domestic partner, grandchild, grandparent, sibling, parent-in-law, blood relation, close association, families, domestic partners. So this is me speaking. That's a very broad definition of family. Right? That's a pretty inclusive when you look at the other states. Okay? And Bob was able to do that. And check me if I'm wrong, but he modeled that consistently across both his high benefit and low benefit models. Yeah.
Did we in fact come to that in the committee, to include all of those?
We did.
Yes.
For the actuary.
For the
For
actuary.
the actuary analysis.
Yeah, not, but that was not for, that was a recommendation.
Back on 9/26.
I don't remember including, when we were working up here at the front of the room, I don't remember we included, close association and blood relation. Unless we took a vote and, but I thought that we came to it unanimously. And that we came closer to FMLA there.
Can I offer
Jeff?
rationale? The underlying rationale was that, that this never would excuse me. The underlying rationale was that strictly for the purposes of the actuary analysis, it was better to go broader, or the most broad, so that the dollars were the highest they would possibly be for both categories. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
To be clear, there's nothing about the actuarial analysis that really delved into the pricing on this level anyway. It would have been completely unaffected if we'd sent a different, there was nothing about the way the actuary did the analysis that made an attempt to capture these extra groups in a meaningful way.
Sure.
You know, I think what the actuarial report did show, though, which has been seen in all the other states, is that this is a fraction of the overall program, which is why it's less relevant to the final numbers. But, you know, I would propose that we start by looking at the family definitions, taking out the blood relative and close association, and then I'm happy to offer a separate, I don't know if it would be as formal as a motion, but some language to consider how many votes we get on that piece beyond the list here of defined family relationships, the child, parent, domestic partner, grandchild, grandparent, parent-in-law.
Okay. Jared, if I can get you to repeat that for me, I'll write it up so that people can.
Everything but blood relation and close association.
Yeah, so that includes child, parent, domestic partner, grandchild, grandparent, sibling, parent-in-law.
Okay, and am I following you that you'd like to see if we get agreement on this, and then we could subsequently check the additional ones?
I'm happy to offer some language subsequently on the other pieces based on our past conversations. I think that's a good way to approach it.
So are you all clear with what we're doing? We're basically gonna have a very large group and then deal with potentially some additional.
So would you keep would you keep members, domestic partners intact, or are you saying everything after?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think
after
that's, yeah, I think we can keep that, and if there's a concern, then we can readdress, but typically, you know, a definition will involve a domestic partner just like a spouse, so they tend to be included. For example, parent-in-law typically includes the parent of a domestic partner as well, interacting all around the country.
Other questions on what Jared just proposed? So Jared, would you suggest we vote on this and then we can see about potentially adding incrementals? I'm seeing some heads nod. That seems to make sense to people. Other discussion before we go to that vote?
Hey Jared, on family members, domestic partners, the way you just summarized it, when I read, the way it's written now is family member, Stanley's family, so I got a second cousin, that's family.
Yeah.
Should we be more prescriptive than that to how you just defined it?
Yeah, I think, you know, unless anyone else has a different thought, we should just clarify parent-in-law or parent of a domestic partner. I think that's typically where you'll see it come in. So I'm not sure where that original language came from, family members, domestic partners. I'm comfortable doing that. I don't know if anyone else would like to offer something different.
So say your two again.
So it would be child, parent, domestic partner, grandchild, grandparent, sibling, parent-in-law, or parent of a domestic partner.
Or parent of a domestic partner, Daniel. Strike family members. Or parent of a domestic partner.
Siblings are no way. Yeah, we keep sibling in.
Can you hear me, Joe?
Yes.
Okay. Judith, there is, I think domestic partners is, oh, sorry, I apologize. No, the clarification is that a spouse is also, included, is that?
Oh, yeah,
Is
that's
that-
listed.
Spouse should be there.
Yeah, is I think, just to clarify that it's different, the domestic partner?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Daniel, how about right here? Child, parent, spouse? Judith?
Absolutely not, Judith.
Domestic partner.
I guess my husband does.
Okay.
Might not be.
All right, now get rid of this domestic partners down here, and I think we've got Jared's intention. Am I right, Jared? That? Okay.
So that's what we're voting.
Sandra?
So I thought that the intention was to veer away from the traditional family, FMLA definition of family, because some are estranged from their nucleus family, and they may have been, may only have an aunt or something, which would be, I guess, under the blood relative.
Mm-hmm.
And so they wouldn't have, you know, they needed care, or the aunt needed care, they would be able to access this program.
Yes.
In order to do that.
So the way that we're approaching it, though, based on how Jared proposed is, we're going to vote on the largest block first, and then we can talk about including additionals. Am I correct? Yes.
I thought blood relation and close association was supposed to be deleted.
Struck.
It is.
They are struck.
Yeah, but yet it's on there.
It's got a line through it.
That's line
Oh,
through.
I can't see that.
Yeah, and by the way, guys, you know, we're sort of limited to what we have. Daniel, for purposes of this, make that big as you can get it and stick it on the screen. There you go. Thank you. Thanks, bud. Okay.
And so far as this does still expand beyond FMLA, there will be an opportunity, even if you're authoring the minority opinion here, for me to make an additional point. Oh, okay, all right. Well, what I mean is that if you had points to make about adding those extras.
So again, Sandra, we're going to talk about adding the additionals, but this, I think, is a good construct for us to move as fast as we can. Ready to roll? Campbell?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Haygood?
Yes.
Make?
Yes.
Manning?
Yes.
Marquez?
Yes.
McInish?
Yes.
Parker Murray?
Yes.
Petrarch?
Yes.
Sullivan?
Yes.
Woligorsky?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Zoe?
Yes.
Okay. So this updated version, I'm thinking it probably makes sense for us to go through a bit more discussion before we assign the voting, or excuse me, assign the authoring. Do you agree? Okay. Jared, do you want to make another proposal?
Yeah, so I would offer something that, you know, takes into account that there are different models for covering other relationships, but, you know, ask the legislature to consider other models. So something along the lines I would offer or make a motion that the legislature is encouraged by this task force and whoever would support this to consider models of caring for other loved ones who are not covered by the listed family relationships that we just talked about, taking into account use of other models by the federal government and other states, clarity of the definition and any related factors, required documentation, and the diversity of Colorado's families.
Okay, couldn't keep up with you. The legislature is encouraged by this task force. Actually, let's have Daniel do it. That way we get it right.
Got a few words. Other loved ones.
Yeah, to consider other models of caring for loved ones who are not included by the listed family relationships above. And then I would say, based on the many conversations we've already had, you know, a comma.
Family relations considered above.
Family relations above, comma, taking into account use of other models by the federal government and other states. clarity of the definition and any related factors, because a lot of what we've talked about is that there's examples that have factors tests for who it meets this. Required documentation, so I know we've talked about how a worker documents the relationship. And then finally, to Sandra's point, the diversity of Colorado's families. And to me, that's, whether this is authored as a majority or minority opinion, you know, I would want to bring out what Sandra just mentioned in terms of LGBTQ or other folks who are estranged or disowned by their family and might need to care for loved ones. I would bring in the experience of folks who need safe leave, who often have to turn to folks for care who aren't in their immediate family, or a spouse or partner, who could be a perpetrator. And then just what we see in terms of other family diversity. So that's how I would consider approaching it, is that we don't try to craft the model, but if there's a subset of us that just want to bring forth the recommendation that the legislature look at the models and these factors.
Okay. I appreciate how thoughtful you are in that, because you recapped a number of the things that I think people are concerned about, right? Like someone inventing an association with very little time. Okay. Discussion about this one?
Yes, I'm confused. So all of that text is going to be in what we're voting on, or this is part of,
It'd be a separate recommendation.
Expanding on the explanation of what our.
It would be a separate recommendation.
Another box.
Am I clear? That's what I understood his intention to be.
Yes.
So it would be an and. The legislature should
Please.
consider other family, what do you call it, family association models or something like that? Family definition models? That would. Thanks. So Diana, what he's trying to do is say, everybody's agreeing on the majority of this. Let's ask the legislature to also be more encompassing in their debate.
So we're putting it as a concern or a minority opinion, or?
Be a separate recommendation.
So then if I have concern that the legislature should consider the implication for, the costs of this program, or the impact to employers, or the impact of how this will be to administer for employers, or all of that just goes below.
You would probably vote no if you have those concerns very strongly, and then write a minority opinion. If it's a finer point, you might vote yes and have other considerations. Could we get a microphone to Stacy? Oops, sorry, who's behind?
So I guess, I hear what you're saying, and I'm looking back at blood relation, close association, that we didn't vote on, and I guess I'm kind of thinking, okay, well, aren't we kind of back in that same area? And I guess I look at this and I think it's a program, and I'm thinking about it from a company standpoint too, of trying to implement this. And I think one of the things in the past that we said was, how do you really manage that? If I come up and I say, Lydia's been living next to me and I'll use close association because I think that's what this kind of gets us. I think that's difficult for employers. And at this point, I think I would vote against this.
Sure, so, I think that's something to bring out in terms of a minority or a secondary opinion, depending on how the votes are. I would just counter that by reminding folks that our country's largest employer, the federal government, more than 2 million workers, has had this for decades. And we've now seen it with an additional 10 to 15 million workers who are covered by 3 states, let alone another set of laws for paid sick time that cover about 20 million workers. So to say that it's something that can't be administered, it currently is being administered. So, and all that I'm suggesting here is that we ask the legislature to consider these various factors and to look at models and let them decide rather than saying this is the exact language or a piece of it. So I think there's points on both sides, so, you know, I'm hoping that that could be brought out in terms of the different opinions on this.
I would just say, I think a counter to that, you know, as I look at the federal FMLA, I don't think it has this type of language.
No, I mean, the federal FMLA has a very restrictive family definition. I think the purpose so many states are passing paid family and medical leave is because the FMLA is seen as not meeting the needs of so many workers. In terms of the federal government, it's the federal government has this for its own workers in terms of their leave, and that's more than 2 million workers.
And I'll
Okay,
say
we'll
this
go
is
Kathy,
last
then
thing. I
Jen.
think the difficulty therein lies with corporations who are required to comply with federal FMLA, and, you know, if we had that at the state level,
So we'll go Kathy, then Judith, then Diana.
Well, I just wanted to also bring up that I think that in the comments, the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition said that this is one of the most important things, because people with disabilities often are living in situations where they have they get supportive care and a network of care from people who are not family, they're close association, they're not blood relations. They could be neighbors, actually, because they might be living in the same kind of housing unit. And so I think that this was an important part for them, and I know that we bring up the LGBTQ community and others, but really that this was a really important point for people with disabilities.
Okay, so let's go Judith and then Diana.
Yeah, I think that again, this is a very important conversation because, you know, I think that we need to honor, you know, that families look differently, and also I think in the expert study report, it also demonstrates for elderly adults that, you know, a lot of times live on their own. They don't have blood relations, you know, and they might be assisted living or who knows, but that there is a diverse, you know, population that needs, you know, access because again, their family relationships just look differently. And I think that also with kind of exploring the different models, you know, I think that, you know, of like documentation, you know, and, you know, demonstrating what a close association is, like, you know, that's, again, a conversation that could be had and that the legislature could look like, because I think that it is important to have, and I do also just want to share that I'm sensitive, that it kind of feels a little hard to hear, you know, people make examples of, you know, people needing access to this, but for example, saying like, oh, you know, I'm going to just, you know, get my waitress and she's going to be my close association. I think that I just would ask that we are sensitive to this conversation because it is people's families. They might not look like ours, you know, but I would say that it's, you know, I think it's a serious conversation, and I believe that if there's concerns about like fraud, I think that we can have those and can put maybe, you know, kind of parameters around that. But I do feel again that these comments around like I'll get my, you know, waitress to be my close association, I just feel that it's like I've heard this conversation going on many years, and I just feel like it just really does hurt me because I just know so many people in my community that look differently and they've had to struggle with being disowned. So again, I just wanted to mention that, and I'm just really excited that you know this conversation can continue.
Diana, then Dana.
Well, I hope we don't have to go through this conversation every time we talk about a point. And we've had conversations like this on every point, and there are places where we fundamentally agree or disagree. Sure. And Jared and I disagree in terms of our level of confidence on how this is going to play out over the long term. And so, in theory, I support everything that you are trying to advocate for, and Judith as well. But in my view, we are trying to override a process that could be a natural process that we could advocate for with a structured policy that is supposed to be imposed on all Colorado workers across the state. That said, our purpose here, or the purpose of some of us, is to raise some red flags and say, I agree with the intent, I agree with some of the concerns and the problems. I understand that you know, the status quo is not perfect, but I also have concerns if we do structure a policy that we have to recognize that we're doing this in a vacuum. And so I just, you know, as I say, I have concerns about not being able to offer a more balanced view of each piece of this.
I understood everything but at that
I
last
know,
bit.
because I completely lost my train of thought.
Okay, all right, let's pass to Dana.
I think that this is a good discussion to have, and I think that we should challenge each other's thoughts. And where I line up, I think it's hard to define love. I do. I've got people that I care about that don't meet the definitions that we have here. So, Judith, I hear what you're saying. That said, and my whole career has been in HR, where I'm having people interpret policy and trying to understand what the right thing to do is. When you talk about if we're going to change the definition to include people with disabilities, or to include LGBT, or to include elderly adults, I probably would vote yes, because I get it. But when we use the term close association, Judith, where I disagree with you, is that opens up a whole bunch of other folks, and it's fraud does increase, but scope of what we're talking about also increases. So I look at the definition that we have, and we have opened the gates already. So when we're using verbiage that is just so generic, from my chair and what I've seen, you're going to get a whole bunch of stuff that does increase what we're trying to do. And that's what I'm disagreeing to, not with how you define love, or should we put additional parameters in that get more people covered. I just think that that's too broad.
Okay, so we're going to call the question. Okay, so if you're not comfortable, you have the no vote available to you. We have the ability for minority reports, we have the ability for care and concerns, and so I think that we've talked about a lot of these things going on, and in the interest of time to move on, I would like us to vote on this, and then we'll take volunteers to author some of those voices so that they're heard, okay?
Can I just make one clarification?
Yes.
I very purposefully didn't use the close association language because there are other models. There was a model introduced in the legislature last session that listed out factors. So I very purposefully, because there are different models, am just suggesting that those models be considered and examined because there are different approaches in terms of language or listing out factors. So that was why I crafted it that way.
Thanks.
Jared, I just have a question. Could this language we put in the prior vote as a concern that we are not as inclusive as the committee had discussions about, rather than having it as an item that's going to be what I'm seeing as a split vote again? It's not unanimous. Would that not?
I think we should vote.
You think you should
I think
vote?
we should
Okay.
Let's vote. Okay.
Ready to vote?
Yes.
Demira? Campbell?
No.
Duncan?
Yes.
Haygood?
No.
Make?
Yes.
Manning?
No.
Marquez?
Yes.
McKinnish?
Yes.
Parker Murray?
Yes.
Petrak?
No.
Sullivan?
No.
Waligorski?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Zoe?
Yes.
8 yeses, 5 noes.
8 yeses, 5 noes. By your rules, that then emerges as a recommendation. And by our structure, we would adopt this top table and author a minority opinion.
I'll participate in writing it.
Okay? Who would like to author the majority?
Surprised, I'm happy to.
Okay, so we'll have Jared. So number 2 goes with, and Jared, do you want to write both of them?
I'm happy to, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Stacy, do you want to write both for that mother recommendation and the second one? Do Do you want to write a minority or just for the second one?
So the first one, we were, you need
Was-
to make sure I'm
Right,
talking about the same.
unanimous.
You're right, it was unanimous, I'm sorry. Sorry,
So
okay.
it would just be on the second.
All right, seems like time for a break. All right,
Good job.
let's come back in 15 minutes. So by that clock back there, 10:45, and we're going to be prompt because we got a long way to go. So this is the top of the second page, job protection, item A. Who'd like to write, and in this case, by the way, we do not have a sufficient majority. We only had 7. So I would suggest to you that this one looks like report template B, which is we need someone to write the rationale for a given duration. We need somebody else to write the rationale for a different duration. Edwin?
I just have one quick
Microphone,
question is that, since we're at 7, can we just ask it in any of the days? Since 120 days has the most, has any of the 180 or 1 year changed their position so that we can offer a majority?
So Edwin's question was, we're pretty close on this one, and is it possible that anybody who supported 180 or 1 year would be willing to support 120? Kathy, you were going to jump in?
Oh, I was gonna.
Microphone, thanks.
Or go the other way. Would anybody at the 120, right? Because.
Well, it seems like that's a much
Bigger
bigger
jump.
bridge to cross than just getting one person on.
Do you want to do a quick hand vote?
So can we go back and see who voted where? I think I wasn't there that day.
Yeah. Yeah. Admira has it pulled up. Can we get a microphone to Admira?
I think your proxy voted in the 1 year.
Okay, that's what I thought.
That's true. Stacy, Dan Combs, is it? He voted for the 1 year, but I can read really quickly through all the days.
Yeah.
120 days, the yeses were Duncan, Make, Marquez, Parker Murray, Waligorski, White, Enzo. Then for 180 days, it was Haygood, Manning, McKinnish. And for 1 year, it was Campbell by proxy, and Petrak and Sullivan.
Okay. So any of you who were either a 180 or a 1 year want to support 120? Anybody who was those of you who were at 120, could you get on board with 180? Because what I would envision, if we can't, is that we need to have 3 columns. The 120, the rationale for 120, the rationale for 180, and the rationale for 360, 65. Okay? You guys are comfortable with that? Okay, then let's assign them. Who's going to be the 120 writer? Judith? Who votes for, or who'll be the 180 writer? There are only 3 of you.
I can do it.
I can do it.
Okay.
I'll volunteer for
Well, I didn't know you were gonna raise
No,
your
I'll
hand.
volunteer for other stuff later. I'm just waiting.
And the 365?
I'll do it.
Stacy?
Stacy, okay. Okay.
Very well. Next item on our list is exemptions. So still within the job protection category, we had several discussions around certain exemptions. However, none of them reached 8. So I would ask the question, does anyone feel like they previously did not vote for one of these exemptions, but that you'd be willing to add? And we can have Admira read the names if it's helpful to you, but with 7 choices, maybe we'd be a bit targeted about that.
Can you explain key position in small business? Is that like a key position in a small business?
Yes. So, Edwin, I'll try. This would be if you have a single human being, if you're a 30-person company and you have 1 payroll person, and you could designate certain positions, not based on salary, but based on operational criticality, that would be exempt.
Actually, to have limited.
Limited.
Yeah,
Limited.
yeah, they have job protection up to 4 weeks.
Okay, so it would be for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
We need to do a better job of using the microphones, folks.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Can I say something?
Yes, if you use a microphone.
I'm gonna make a motion that when we proceed with this, recommendation, we have, someone from the no exemptions category write something for no exemptions, and I would be happy to write about all of the exemptions and just make one bullet point for each, given a rationale.
So, no exemptions group, and then a
Exemptions,
potential exemptions group.
yes.
I like it.
You guys,
I'm not real clear on.
Exemptions or limitations.
explain again, please,
So
Heather.
my suggestion here is, or my motion, is that when we draft these recommendations, we have one column that says, you know, a substantial group of task force members support no exemptions, here's their rationale, someone can author that piece. And then another column that says, another substantial group of task force members support some type of exemption or limitation, and below in bulleted format are the exemptions with a line or two about the rationale for those exemptions or limitations.
I think that's a thumbs up. Yeah,
Thumbs
no-
up?
Thumbs up, we don't need a
Thumbs
motion.
up? Yeah, this is just structure.
Yeah.
You guys good with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Let us then ask for who would be the no exemption author?
Sure.
Jared, thank you.
Don't help with that.
Jared and Lydia. And potential exemptions.
Hadley and Diane, yeah.
Hadley, is that you?
Sure, I can be responsible for collecting all of them together, and if you want to draft specific ones, I welcome that.
Edwin, do you want to lead that one?
Well, for me, I feel the key position in small business exemption is a very important aspect that has not been fully addressed. I would like to have an opportunity.
Okay, let's do this. Hadley, let's take you at your offer.
Yep.
You'll quarterback that one, but both Diana and Edwin will offer content. Okay. Okay, so in this one, guys, we're gonna stay at red. No agreement, but we've got structure. You didn't achieve consensus.
Are we talking about duration now?
Not
Oh,
yet.
you're talking
Job protection.
Job protection, yeah.
Yep. Okay, so let's talk about duration though. So this is the middle of the second page for those of you following along. There were 3 separate items here. These are related to parameters that went to the actuary. Daniel's got them up for us. Thanks. So the first of them was around the maximum duration per event. The second one was the extension of the bonding period, okay, which you have a sufficient number of votes to send to the actuary. We need to confirm that based upon what you heard, you still would like to propose that to the legislature. And then maximum duration within a 52-week claim period is item C. Let's take them in order unless there's a better design. Okay, so you all proposed the low benefit model, 6 weeks for family leave and 6 weeks for medical, and on the high benefits, 14 and 14. Do any of you want to offer a middle ground based upon what came back from Bob? And this is one of the very pivotal parameters in determining the cost of the entire program. Does anybody want to offer a single parameter? Edwin?
So I'd like to offer, Edwin, so I'd like to offer 12 weeks. That's just this morning, Congress has passed a federal paid family leave at 12 weeks. I don't know if you guys heard that.
Can you say a little bit more about them a little bit louder?
Oh yeah, I would suggest that the benefits, maximum benefit to be 12 weeks. as that will be consistent with.
What was the federal part?
Yeah, it was just passed this morning by Congress at the,
Federal employees.
For federal
the federal
employees.
employee
Yeah.
benefits be extended to 12 weeks,
Right.
paid benefits. So that would may be consistent.
Okay, so that 2 million person, or 2 million employee organization, the federal government?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Per event?
12 weeks maximum duration per event. And would be the same for family and the same for family and medical? Edwin?
Yes.
Okay. Discussion around that?
Clarification of 12 weeks per event?
Yes. Yeah, so as part C, we'll talk about the maximum duration within a 52-week period. But part A is per event maximum.
Right.
Discussion around this?
I just clarification because just it seems to be cycling off. There it goes. All right. I think to clarify, because I think Stacy, what you might have been asking was this for birth mothers.
This would be, I presume, a stacking. We don't have this listed separately as a thing. But for birth mothers, the stacking of the family and the medical. So the 12 weeks medical and the 12 weeks bonding would be stacked, right, for 24 weeks for birth mothers. Is that?
Well, that depends on what we get to see.
Well, that's different than maximum duration. Those are two separate parameters. It's true we had them line up,
Yeah.
but those are actually two separate policy parameters.
Mhm.
There's the maximum kind of combined for a birth mother and the 52-week maximum. Does that, there was,
Yeah.
Helps things.
Correct. So the medical part in terms of prior to birth, that would be medical, and then the bonding would be the families.
That's not.
I think we need more clarification. I'm just reading faces. So anybody want to propose a question or ask a question? Kathy?
So,
Daniel, we might need batteries.
so it would be 12 weeks for medical or 12, and 12 weeks for family.
Correct.
Okay.
Because
Instead-
right now what's on the table is 6 and 6, and on the low end, and then 14 and 14 on the high.
So coming in
If
kind of
one
in the
say
middle.
yes, it's 12 and 12.
Okay.
Then that would bring us in line with Congress just passed this morning.
Okay.
Other
So
clarification?
that is to replace a low and a high? They
That's
just
what-
have one central recommendation?
Well, the low benefit and high benefit model was determined to go to the actuary.
Right.
Edwin's saying a single policy parameter.
Okay, so the vote, if we vote now on this, I would be voting for the 12-week per event.
Yes. Is it clear enough that we go to a vote and we see where we are and then move it along? Okay. So, quick recap. We're talking maximum of 12 weeks per event for each family and medical. There would be, implied in this, would be a stacking in the case of childbirth, right? Because there's the medical portion and then the family portion. Kathy?
can I just? I think we have to press.
Sorry, can I just say though that yes, while you would have a stacking for birth mothers, it's unlikely that birth mothers would get 12 weeks of medical leave.
Right.
For pregnancy disability, they would likely get 6 or 8, and then bonding would be on top of that, so it's not an automatic thing that every birth mother is gonna get 24 weeks in that case.
Okay. Let's go to the vote. Campbell.
No.
Duncan?
Yes.
Haygood?
No.
Make?
Yes.
Manning?
No.
Marquez?
Yes.
McKinnish?
No.
Parker Murray,
Yes.
Petrek,
No.
Sullivan,
No.
Waligorski,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Zoe.
Yes.
Admira, the total?
7 yeses, 6 noes.
7 yeses, 6 noes. Does anyone want to resurrect that with a different number? See if that gets us closer? Because otherwise what we'll do is just share that we did a range. Here's the case for the lower in the range. Here's the case for higher in the range. Okay. Edwin?
Is there a reason, since it's fairly close at 7.6, is there a reason why we're not adopting minority opinion for the 6? Or have you agreed?
You have to get to 8 in order for it to be a recommendation by your own rules. So my suggestion, you get 2 options here. One is turn your 12 into something slightly less and see if you can get a little bit more support for it. Or simply say, here's what we sent to the actuary. Here's the case for something that is lower. Here's the case for something that is higher. Dana?
So what I have a hard time voting for a number that we're just picking on, with at least with the actuarials of 6 and 14, I have some parameters of what that actually means from the actuary. To pick another one is just kind of hard, because I think it's already a crapshoot. That's like a super crapshoot to me. So to me, it makes sense, since we did all the work and the actuary looked at the high and the low, that we give that to the legislature and let them figure it out. If they want to pick a different number, they're going to do it anyway.
Okay. Anybody have a different opinion? Anybody want to offer a compromise number other than 12? I'm not seeing any. So what that would mean is we would have a low benefit model rationale and a high benefit model rationale. Correct? Who wants to volunteer for the low benefit model rationale?
I'll take it.
Thank you, Stacy. Who wants to make the case for the high benefit model? Sandra. Thank you. All right. The next one is submitting to the actuary an extended 26-week bonding period. Okay. So that's this item. We had 8 ayes and 5 nays associated with sending it to the actuary. Okay? And my recollection of Bob's numbers is not great. Does anybody remember what the implication was?
I can pull it up on the screen if you like.
That'd be great. Thank
Okay.
you, Jeff.
Page 25 of the report, Daniel. We have to chunk it out by section.
Yep.
Perhaps the premium table in the middle is the most important.
So for those of you who haven't seen this table, I'll take a crack at interpreting it. In the first year, 2024, it would be an incremental 0.3% of payroll. That would be the incremental premium collected in order to fund that benefit. Okay?
I'll just, maybe this is the part where we're being frank and direct and everything.
Sure.
I was one of the 8 yes votes to send this to the actuary because I wanted to see the analysis, and I thought information is power, so let's get some, but ultimately I would not support a recommendation for an extended 26 bonding period. So we can have a vote on the recommendation, but I'll be a changed vote.
I think we gotta get this on gotta get it on the record. Okay. Let's go to a vote. So to include Back to the report, please, Daniel. To propose an extended 26-week bonding period. Okay. Campbell?
No.
Duncan?
Yes.
Haygood?
No.
Make?
Yes.
Manning?
No.
Marquez?
Yes.
McKinnish?
No.
Parker Murray?
Yes.
Petrak?
No.
Sullivan?
No.
Waligorski?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Zoe?
Yes.
7 yeses, 6 noes.
7 yeses, 6 noes. So we are back. This one actually, we don't have a recommendation on which to hang this. So this was something that emerged.
Right.
We reviewed. So do we treat it like high benefit and low benefit model? There's no recommendation, but it's something that the legislature should know about. Right? So who's going to make the case for? Okay.
Thank you, Edwin.
So the rationale, Edwin, who will make the case against?
Doesn't that just
Speaking
come
against
under
the
the,
babies.
I feel like the rationale for the low benefit model automatically, I don't think.
Thank you, Tara.
Yeah.
Okay.
I appreciate
Low
it.
benefit
Yeah,
model,
I
Stacey
would
just
agree
nodded
with that. Yeah.
including extended bonding period.
Great.
No.
Okay. Okay to go on? Maximum duration in a 52-week claim period. So on this one, for the low benefit model, you all submitted a number of 12, and for the high benefit, 28 weeks. So this would be the cumulative amount before you simply would run out of benefit. This one wasn't resoundingly passed to send to the actuary. You know, these numbers were not consensus. Anybody want to make a proposal? Daniel, if you put your cursor right there, and then insert page break. Insert menu above. Oop. Okay, there you go. What discussion do we need on this item? Kathy?
Can I just ask a question? What happened to Edwin's proposal for the 12 weeks and 12 weeks for a combined maximum of 24 weeks? So we had 7-6. Does that mean that we just don't talk about that one?
No, what it means is you're going to make a proposal for the low benefit model, which will be written by Stacy,
Great.
and a high benefit model, which will be written by Sandra.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Edwin? Ask one mic, please.
Since the previous vote fell on the two separate low and high, it seems like we should just follow the same in this case, have offering the low benefit model and the high benefit.
Anybody disagree with that? Who wants to author the high benefit, or excuse me, the low benefit model?
These should really just all be the same.
Same people?
Yeah.
I think it makes most sense.
You just said for
Love you, Terry. We
combined
should
one
vote.
sentence.
Sandra, are you okay with that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Tara's making a case that
I'll help you.
we should be just discussing A and C simultaneously, which would, the implication would be you'd author that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Getting voluntary.
Thanks. All right, folks.
Page 3.
We are now on to page 3 of 5. Okay. This is wage replacement amount. Tara, Would your suggestion around computation method pick up here or on the next item, maximum weekly wage replacement?
Oh, for the, you mean under the UI? Yes, that would be under here, the
You
wage
get the mic.
replacement amount, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so on this one, this mechanism, we voted 12-1 to send this to the actuary. So both the high benefit and low benefit model contain that rationale, right? Correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, just a question. Do you all feel like we need to change that or simply turn that into a recommendation? Tara?
Why don't we go ahead and vote on this as a recommendation? And like, as Greg pointed out, this is where there should be an additional note on this, Daniel, that the average weekly wage would be calculated according to the UI calculation.
All right, so Tara's suggesting we just go to a vote on this and see if we believe this is an appropriate recommendation. Any objection to that? All right, let's go then.
Can we do one quick thing?
Yeah.
Tara?
Microphone? Let's pass out those
I
additional
feel like
ones.
that side needs an extra microphone.
Yeah. So when I read the definition, Tara, can you just not look at that and just say it?
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so you have the state average weekly wage, right? For anyone making less than half of the state average weekly wage, they would get 90% wage replacement. For anyone making more than half of the state average weekly wage, they would get 90% wage replacement of their wages up to that 50% of that average weekly wage, and every dollar they earn above that, they would get 50% wage replacement on that, up to a maximum amount, which we had previously set at 95% of the state average weekly wage. If in the break you want to see a little table,
Visual type, so I wouldn't.
I've got that.
And I think you all get this, but the idea is low wage workers need a much higher percent of their wage to be replaced for them to access the benefits.
To be able to use it.
If you're living paycheck to paycheck, even
Right.
75, 80% is not enough. You'll stay at work.
Yeah.
Okay. With that clarification, ready to vote?
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Duncan. Kevin. Haygood.
Yes.
Meek.
Yes.
Manning.
Yes.
So enthusiastic.
Noted, sir.
I'm also a yes.
Manning is a yes. Marquez.
Yes.
McKinnish.
Yes.
Parker Murray.
Yes.
Petrak.
Yes.
Sullivan.
Yes.
Waligorski.
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Zoe.
Yes.
All right. Who's going to write the majority opinion on this one?
I'm
Who's
looking
going
at
to write the rationale?
I'm looking at
Kathy?
Kathy.
We didn't have any nays, but do we have anybody who'd like to add, what are we calling it? Concerns and clarifications.
I think I would like to add like a clarification because I think there's just again,